In this lesson, we're going to look at how virtual machines operate and their benefits and drawbacks. Now, we've gone through the concept of virtual memory, where we basically create additional memory, much more than the physical memory that's present in the system. And virtual machines work using a similar principle. You're in effect creating an entire machine or an entire computer within an existing computer through the power of emulation. So let's begin by looking at some key terms. Of course, there is virtual machine, which is an emulation of an existing computer system. So a computer operating system runs within another computer's operating system. Emulation, the word basically means the use of an app or a device to imitate the behavior of another program or device. For example, you're running Windows on the Mac OS. The host operating system is the operating system that controls the physical hardware, and the guest operating system is the operating system running on a virtual machine. Finally, you've got the hypervisor, which is the emulation software, the virtual machine software that creates and runs these virtual machines. So do pause the video and jot these key terms down. We'll be referencing these in the lesson. So let's begin by looking at a virtual machine and how it actually works. So you've got actual physical hardware, and on the physical hardware you will have an operating system. So virtual machine is created when you take that existing operating system, which is now called the host operating system, and you set up using emulation software a virtual machine that uses a guest operating system. Now, in a machine, in a normal computer, you have one CPU, you have some RAM, you've got some storage. But when we use this emulation software, which is called the hypervisor, we can split those resources to create multiple virtual machines. So you might say that, okay, if I've got a 4-core CPU, 2 cores can go to this virtual machine and 2 cores can stay with the host operating system. And if I've got 16 GB of RAM, 8 GB of RAM can go towards this virtual machine, and the other 8 GB is available to the host operating system. And similarly, you can work with the storage that's on your SSD or your hard disk drive. This emulation engine, which is referred to as the hypervisor, handles the virtual part, the virtual CPU, the virtual memory, all the other hardware devices that you got connected to the actual operating system can be shared with the guest operating system. It maps all of them to the physical hardware on the host computer. So when you're using a guest machine or a virtual machine with a guest operating system and you are using the keyboard, those instructions are passed onto the guest operating system and not the host operating system. But they do go via the host operating system because the host operating system gets it first, and then the hypervisor maps it and uses it for its guest operating system's input. So the process works like this. You got your physical hardware, you install your host operating system, then you install the virtual machine software, and then once the virtual machine software has been installed, you then install the guest operating system, which runs the emulation normally in a window on the host operating system. The guest operating system has no awareness whatsoever that it's on an alien machine. It believes it's actually running on native hardware. So for example, it thinks that it's got access to 8 GB of RAM, your 2 cores, some hard disk drive space, and all the hardware that's connected to it. It doesn't realize that everything is going through the host operating system. And it's possible for you to run more than one guest operating system on a computer. Now, if you're into app creation, you would be coding an app, you would be designing the UI, and you would need to test it on multiple phone models. Now, chances are you won't have access to multiple phone models, so you can virtually emulate them. If you ever experienced Xcode, you'll probably see that you can have a range of iPhones where you can test your app on and see how it works. And similarly, if you've got Android Studio, that also offers a lot of Android devices where you can emulate the app and then test it out to make sure it's bug-free. Now let's look at the features of a virtual machine. So the guest operating system is basically an operating system running in a virtual machine. It controls the virtual hardware during the emulation stage. The OS is being emulated within another OS, and the guest operating system is running under the control of the host operating system, even though the guest operating system thinks it's running on native hardware. The host operating system's features include that this is the operating system that controls the actual physical hardware. It is the normal operating system for the computer, the physical computer, and this one runs and monitors the virtual machine software. So you've got your physical hardware, you've got your host operating system, then you've got your hypervisor, which is the app that emulates. That creates the actual virtual machine, and then the guest operating system runs on this virtual hardware. And you can have multiple guest operating systems, and any apps that run on the guest operating system think that they're running on native hardware because the guest operating system thinks the same thing. But everything passes through the host operating system. The diagram on the top right showcases this perfectly. So do pause the video and study it so you understand the structure. Now let's look at some benefits and limitations of virtual machines, and we'll start with the benefits. The guest operating system, which is hosted on a virtual machine, can be used without impacting anything outside the virtual machine. So what actually happens is that you've got this bubble created, and anything that happens, any crashes, just occur within that bubble. So the host operating system isn't affected. And if something goes wrong, the host operating system can just shut the hypervisor down without affecting the main computer. It's also possible to run apps which are not compatible with the host computer. Say, for example, you've got the Mac OS and you wanted to run some Windows software. You normally can't run it, but if you install a virtual machine with Windows on, you can run that software. It's possible to emulate old and legacy software on the new system by running a compatible guest operating system as a virtual machine. Now think about game emulation and things like that. Older games can be emulated on modern computers, so people can have access to those as well. And finally, they're very useful for testing a new operating system or perhaps a new app, since they will not crash the host computer if something does go wrong, because everything operates in that bubble, in that shell, in that app window, so the host operating system has full control of it. Of course, there are limitations as well. You do not get the same performance when running as a guest operating system as you do when you're running natively on the original system, because A, you're sharing resources and everything is being emulated. So there is a processing hit. It's quite complex building in-house virtual machine software, and it also can be very expensive. So there's a select few companies that are experts in creating virtual machine software, and we end up purchasing those or working with those. And of course, they're complex to manage and maintain as well. So if something does go wrong, you need to know hardware architecture and software engineering to fix problems, because you are trying to translate instructions between two different types of operating system. Now, of course, saying that, it is possible to have the same type of operating system on a virtual machine as well. So you technically can have a Mac OS host operating system and another virtual machine that has a Mac OS on it as well. That's possible as well. However, that still is complex to manage and maintain. Okay, that's the end of today's session. You should by now know what virtual machines are. You should know how they operate. You should know the benefits and drawbacks of virtual machines. If you do have any questions, please do get back to me. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.